Audio Unleashed. We're recording, by the way.
Excellent. That's always a good sign.
It is a good sign.
So a good start to our process here is to start recording.
Necessary but not sufficient criterion for getting a podcast going. Have the tape rolling, or the record button pushed, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. By the way, this is Audio
Unleashed.
I am Brent Butterworth.
And I am Dennis Berger.
Good. We got that out of the way.
Who are you, dear listener? Who are you and why are you here?
We're about to discover some of that. We're going to be discovering that. We're going to start with someone who I think is probably not a listener.
No way.
Which is Paul McGowan from PS Audio. Increasingly notorious character on YouTube for his, how would you describe his attitudes about audio?
I don't think it's so much his attitudes about audio that are noteworthy here. It's just the fact that he has developed a reputation for delivering hot takes that
good. Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Well, I would say they're probably not far out of the mainstream of audiophile thought. I would put it that way. Maybe that he is definitely sort of in the more touchy-feely, spooky kind of domain of audiophilia, but very much wants to be seen as the sort of scientific domain of audiophilia. So,
yeah, because PS Audio makes, audio electronics, and we have said many times that the differences in sound between audio electronics are typically pretty negligible. So, he's got to sell stuff, and he's got to say that there are these big differences. And I think in Paul's case, he genuinely believes it. And, it's not like I disagree with everything Paul says, but some of it. Anyway, he is addressing one of his commenters on his YouTube channel was addressing something that Audio Science Review had tested one of Paul's power regenerator products, which is a power conditioner. It's like a power conditioner, except it completely regenerates your AC. It's basically like a 60 hertz oscillator driving an amplifier. So it's completely fresh AC without the kind of noise and stuff that you might have on an AC line. And Audio Science Review tested it and found that it was ineffective. And yet one of Paul's watchers, is that what you call a YouTube audience member, a watcher?
Viewers, I believe we call them.
Viewer. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Good. I'm getting more hip to your terminology here. But one of his viewers had pointed out that, he felt that Amir at Audio Science Review had gotten it wrong, at least in terms of the effect on sound quality. So we're going to dig into that a little bit and look at the different points of view that were expressed. And also we may, if we're up to it, share our own points of view on this subject.
Okay.
It's possible.
Cool. Yeah.
I know no one wants to hear that, but, we got to indulge ourselves.
I think that's kind of what people are here to hear, man. That's definitely what they want to hear. Yeah, for whatever reason.
Wow. I thought they were just here for straight audio reporting of the news. We report, you decide.
Oh, no. What have you done?
Anyway, next segment. What's up next?
So we got a really cool comment on our last episode, The Streisand Effect. Someone left a comment on the YouTube video posting of the episode. And this is from a listener. I mean, there's not really much to watch with our YouTube post. It's just a background that's animated. So listener Lekmanin9990 left this comment. Great episode. Hope you guys had a great holiday. Just saw a video from OMA called On Listening Part 7, The Japanese Kissa. He's quite the character. He's talking about Jonathan Weiss, I believe his last name is, the guy from OMA. He's quite the character, and maybe he's having some kind of life crisis, but some things he said rattled my brain a little bit. I would love to hear your thoughts. So the post in question was Jonathan of Oswald's Mill Audio talking about a trip that he took to Japan. I believe he was there at the behest of Audio-Technica, whose cartridges his company uses on their turntables, right? So, and he was there experiencing the Jazz Kissas, the listening bars. So this video is a 30-minute rant about why they're great and why it could never work in America because Americans are just doing it wrong, apparently.
Yeah.
He sort of covers his whole philosophy on listening, on audiophilia, on what's important, and gives his thoughts on the resurgence of popularity of vinyl. I mean, there's a lot that he covers here.
Yeah.
But boy, this video was, it was a lot. I think it took me like 3 sessions to get through it just because it was, well, let's just say it was a lot to process and leave it at that.
It's a lot to process. And, it's an in-depth examination of the philosophy of, I think, audio reproduction and music listening and extended into, the state of humanity as a whole. And I was intrigued to hear his opinions about all this. And I'll be excited to hear what you thought of it too, Dennis.
Okay, cool. Or what are we going to talk about after that?
After that, we're going to talk about, you know what? I did not get this dude's name. What was his name?
Dom Sigalis, I believe.
Okay.
That's how you pronounce
he is
that?
a music producer, apparently, and he did a YouTube video called I Compared Vinyl versus Tape versus Cassette versus Streaming. Results were shocking. That's in all caps, with an exclamation point at the end. So it was shocking.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. He starts with, a production that he did, and he produces a lot of stuff in analog. And he converted it to reel-to-reel tape, to cassette, to, I guess he started with a digital production, right?
Right, yeah.
And then he converted it to reel-to-reel, probably 7.5 inches per second. It looked like a consumer deck. And then also to cassette, and then to, what was it, Apple Music and Spotify.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was interesting. And we want to kind of dig into what he found and what his methodology was, which I think we kind of like to some degree, and about his results and what it all means to audiophiles like you and me and every listener to Audio
Unleashed.
That's pretty smooth, huh?
That was pretty smooth. Yeah. Nice segue, sir.
So, what are we going to do for our Patreon segment?
For our Patreon segment, our patrons are going to get to listen to me be educated in real time, because I was fortunate enough to completely and utterly ignore CES this year. CES was formerly in the bygone era known as the Consumer Electronics Show. It no longer stands for that. It stands for CES, but big electronics show in January in Las Vegas every year. And thankfully, Soundstage just completely ignores it because there's no reason not to. But you, as a full-time employee of the Wirecutter, were not so fortunate. And you covered a lot of CES. So I want to sort of pick your brain about, was there anything worth paying attention to in the realm of audio coming out of this show? And
answer, yes.
Oh, the answer might not surprise you. The answers are not shocking.
Well, actually, that would be surprising to a lot of people that there was something audio worth talking about at CES.
The fact that the answer is not surprising will surprise you or something.
Right. I'm very confused.
This is just, I think we're going to need to like a sword to cut this Gordian knot. But,
yes.
do you want to tease anything, or do you want to just skip right past that and wait until the Patreon segment to talk about that?
What did we can talk a little bit about sound bars. We can talk a little bit about the pretty major reintroduction of a heralded brand that has seen better days. And
I know what you're talking about. I actually know. I got this press release. Yeah.
Some other stuff.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's jump into PS Audio, Paul McGowan, and Audio Science Review. So for those of you who've never watched Paul McGowan's videos, basically what he does is, and look, I may be cynical here, but I'm not entirely convinced that these emails that he's printed out and reads every episode are from real people. I don't know. I've never.
So it's like a Penthouse forum thing?
Yeah, it might be a Penthouse forum thing, but basically, Paul's got a couple of sheets of paper every time, and he supposedly reads an email or a correspondence from a PS Audio fan, and then answers their question. And this question, I don't remember the correspondent's name, but anyway, PS Audio fan had said, "Hey, I ordered a Power Plant 3. And in the meantime, while I was waiting for it to come in, I went and read the review from Audio Science Review, and they were basically saying, it doesn't actually eliminate any noise, and here are measurements." And the guy was like, "But I plugged it in, and all of a sudden, I wasn't listening to my system anymore. I was listening to the music." And then I unplugged it, and I was gonna do a comparison, but I got called away. And so I came back to my system the next day and listened to it without the power plant in place. And all of a sudden, I was distracted by the noise and the distortion. And so obviously ASR is wrong. Let's explain why they're wrong, Paul. Tell me why my purchases are valid. And I'm editorializing a little bit there.
Okay.
So yeah, Paul comes in and goes, "Well, I like Amir a lot because, he does measurements and we love measurements. But in this case, he just failed to understand the product." And then he explains the product and says, I don't know. I don't know if he ever explained to my satisfaction why Amir got it wrong, right? Because one of the things that Paul says is, well, this is not supposed to eliminate noise. But then if you go to the PS Audio website and look it up, one of the benefits of this thing is supposedly that it eliminates noise.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the description from the product listing. "In the process of regeneration, any problems commonly found in your power line, such as low voltage, distorted waveforms, sagging power, flat topping, and noise are eliminated." And Paul's saying, but it doesn't eliminate noise. So there's a conflict between his messaging here and the product page, but I don't know if that's important. I just wanted to point it out. That was a little odd.
Well, I personally find it shocking that a high-end audio manufacturer cannot remember all the things he's said in the past about his own products. That's never happened before. So,
oh, you need the sarcasm font, man.
Yeah. So, I will say kudos to this letter writer, LW in comment section parlance, who did not, because one of the common processes of people who read reviews is that I found to my dismay for the last 30-something years is that they will buy a product and then go read the reviews and then get all mad if their reviewer doesn't like it. Which has just always been so baffling to me. But I get this all the time on Wirecutter's comments section where I test, Bluetooth speaker or a soundbar or something, and someone bought one that we ended up not liking too much, and they get all upset. Right. Whereas this guy at least was like, I don't think he sent Amir a harshly worded email. It sounds like he just talked to Paul and said, "Hey, I agree with you," and that's fine. But there is part of Paul's pitch that I do buy, and that's he's talking about how this is a fully regulated device, right? This power supply he makes, and it he talks about how you can have if your amp's really being pushed, and that means a big amp, right? A big amp is really being pushed, probably by a pretty, insensitive speaker. Your power line can sag, right? Your AC power line voltage will sag, right? And that can affect the performance of your other components. Is it noticeable? Well, it could be. I mean, but you're not talking about standard listening. You're talking about like an old set of teal CS5s with a with some big Krell amp, which those things could shut down even like a Krell or something, because they were like 2 ohm. They were like flat 2 ohms through the whole audio band. And they were not real efficient. And I mean, I saw them shut down a Krell one time, a big giant Krell, and blew the breaker. So it could, if you've got like a set of speakers and you're really running them, you might pull 1,000 watts or something on a peak. And, you might, although, your amplifier has, big power supply capacitors in there, hopefully, if it's a Class A B or Class A amp, that would, help hit that peak without making the power line sag. But, you could get power line sag. And, would it affect would it affect the CD player? No. Would it affect the preamp? I don't know, maybe a little bit. And it'd be just like one peak momentary, but it could. So theoretically, it could make a difference. And I'll say that part of the pitch, okay, fine, whatever.
Can I ask you a question real quick as a former Californian? Here's something I'm curious about. So here in Alabama, where I live, most of the power in my area comes from hydroelectric. And so we've never had a problem with brownouts or anything like that, or, sagging power, what have you, right?
Yeah.
But what we do have here is a lot of thunderstorms. And so I moved into this house in 1998, and this house has been hit by lightning multiple times since I've lived here. And I have fried a couple of power strips, in the past, and mostly like monster power strips or whatever. And so for me, like it's kind of important that at least the gear that I rely on for my work, my computers, things like that, my AV systems and my stereo system are plugged into something that can really handle that kind of crazy influx of power. And so I use series mode power protection. Specifically, I used to from Surgex, right? Nothing that I've ever had plugged into Surgex has been damaged. Lots of things that I have had plugged into other stuff either has been damaged or that MOV was a sacrificial lamb and it blew up, right? So, but what I'm saying is, I think in different parts of the country, there are different power needs. But what I'm curious about is someone who has lived in California, which I have not. I hear a lot about rolling brownouts and things like that. Is that consequential for your audio system, and would something like this help?
Oh boy, it's so infrequent. I mean, that was a bit of a thing. That was more of a thing about 25 years ago when the whole Enron scandal was happening, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't really remember there being brownouts. They still have it when sometimes they have to shut the power down when they have, just like now, when they're having, huge winds, and the winds take out power lines and start fires. But I don't remember a brownout, which would be, as opposed to a blackout where your power cuts off, a brownout is where your voltage sags, right?
Right.
Because of too much demand, which means like maybe everybody has their AC on or something like that, which certainly can happen in California, but I don't see it as a real problem. And honest to God, if you're having a power brownout, is your attention really focused on inner detail?
That's a good point. But I was just thinking about in terms of like, maybe you don't know it's coming and whatever. You're sitting there and all of a sudden your lights are dimming and stuff like that. So
I was there for 20 years and I really don't. I mean, occasionally some drunk would drive their car into a power pole and, cause the power to go out for an hour. Then usually they were right up on it and fixed it, and that was that. Yeah. But, I don't remember it ever being a problem. I'll just put it to you that way. Not where I was. And I was in the middle of the suburbs. I was in Canoga Park. Not an area that's affected by fires. So, because it's all, concrete. But I do think that, there's a point that Paul made in here that I thought was really relevant. And that's that, we talk about how you can, in a listening test, you can have bias based on your knowledge of what the product is. But this LW points out, could you have bias based on the measurements of the product. And absolutely you can. Anybody who does measurements, I think, runs into that problem where they really, you start to be aware of it. Like if you do the measurement first, certainly for the first many years I was doing measurements, I would expect if I saw like a dip at, I don't know, 1K or something like that, I'd be like, okay, there's going to be a dip at 1K. I have to hear that. And, but eventually, once you get a lot more experience, you start to realize like, my subjective perception of sound quality is indicated by measurements, but it doesn't always square with the measurements. And you just have to be aware of that. So that's an important point. That's perfectly fine. I'm not saying this product doesn't work, by the way. And, it's, if you really want to be fussy about it, fine. Believe me, I will tell you that like a lot of the power conditioners out there, I don't see anything worthwhile in the engineering, and I don't see anything worthwhile coming out of the speakers. But this thing actually, from an engineering standpoint, I remember actually I talked to Paul about this when he first introduced this thing, which would have been about 1999 or something. And I was just like, that's a really good idea. That actually makes sense. You're going to be limited as to, it's not going to have the power output of a, passive device that just hooks up a bunch of, reactive components to the AC line, right? But which is what most power conditioners are. They just hook up, array of capacitors and inductors and things like that and filter the AC power line. But in many cases, they don't really limit the power coming out of it. Whereas this, you're limited to the output power of the, like I said, it's basically an oscillator with an amplifier. You're limited to the output power rating of the amplifier, basically, even though they don't call it an amplifier, it is. And actually, and Paul said that to me. I said, so this is basically like an oscillator with a power amp. He's like, yeah. Which is this is from an engineering standpoint, if you want a super, super, super clean power supply, this is one good way to do it. Or batteries, Well, although batteries eventually sag. But
one thing that I want to point out just for people who, some of our normie listeners who might be a little confused by what you just said, like this does not replace the power supply in your component, right?
Right.
And furthermore, if the power supply in your component, if there's a wall wart, let's just say this is not universally true, but it's generally a good rule of thumb. If you have a wall wart, then that's going to be a switching power supply, right? And if you've got a switching power supply, it would be hard to convince me that this is going to make any difference.
It's not. And also if you have a disc player, also they may have made some that weren't switching power supplies, but I'm not aware of any. A huge number of audio components now have switching power supplies. And in fact, even a lot of high-end amplifiers now have switching, Constellation Audio just went over to full switching power supplies.
Really?
Just because they sell, it's always been a worldwide brand. They're based in Australia, they build in California, but they've always sold all over the world. And they just found that they had so many problems adapting to different power supplies back when they were in, or different, when I say power supply, different power systems, right? Like, 220, 50 hertz, whatever, and all that kind of thing. And there's a lot of different power systems. There's basically the American standard, and which is similar to the Japanese standard. There's the European standard, but then there's also some other weird ones, and they needed to adapt to that, and they just found that it was so hard to do it, and they couldn't get consistent performance from country to country. So they found an engineer who made a really, 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 really good switching power supply. So they switched completely over to that, and they are getting slightly better performance than they got before.
Good for them. I have to say, I'm impressed. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm legitimately impressed that they would do the right thing, but perhaps the unorthodox thing, the thing that would be,
right. Well, they're taking a risk.
Yeah, contraindicated by the mythology of our hobby, right?
Although Morali, who runs the company, told me that, and I should say I've written a lot of marketing stuff for them, but he told me that he expects that the EU will basically more or less outlaw linear power supplies.
Interesting.
Just for the power consumption problems with them.
Yeah.
Which, okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know how significant that is in the grand scheme of things, but look, any increase in efficiency is good, in my opinion.
I agree. So. Do you want to go on since we're talking about worldwide scenarios here? Do you want to segue gracefully into another scenario that is non-North American?
I have to say, buddy, that is one of your better segues, and you're getting really good at this. So that's saying something.
I think I'll get hired as a radio host if I had your voice, if I had my brains and your voice, I would be the next Joe Rogan.
Oh, no. No. Oh, man. Why didn't you leave it alone when it was good? We were good, and then you had to go
then we could fly private.
Oh, that's a good
Wouldn't
point.
That be awesome?
I would actually have leg room. Yeah. Anyway, it was a good segue before you stomped all over it. So let's go take a break, fill up our waters, and we'll come back to talk about the Japanese Kissa.
All right.
Welcome back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
Nice. And as I said in our intro, this segment was actually inspired by a listener, Lekmenin9990, who left a comment on our last episode. I'll just read it again. It's a pretty short comment. I know I already read it in the intro, but just to set the stage here. So Lek is, we'll just call him Lek, or is it Lekman? I don't know. Anyway, this listener says, great episode. Hope you guys had a great holiday. Just saw a video from OMA on listening part 7, the Japanese Kissa. He's quite the character, and maybe he's having some kind of life crisis, but some of the things he said rattled my brain a little. I would love to hear your thoughts. And so I went and looked up this video, and it is it is from Jonathan Weiss, who's I think the owner of the founder of OMA, Oswald's Mill Audio. I'm not very familiar with this character, and in fact, I think I've heard of him once or twice, but this is the first time I've actually seen him speak or anything like that.
So what do they make? What does Oswald's Mill Audio make?
A lot of high-end stuff, man. So let's see. Products. They're making loudspeakers. They're making amplifiers. They make a record player that I'm going to just guess. I mean, there's no way that thing isn't, 5 figures easily. And then there's like a separate tone arm. They make very high-end audio.
Very exotic speakers. They make wild
furniture. Yeah. They make a record crate that's basically just a wooden crate. They don't list a price. Let's use our Google foo real quick. Maybe.
Because I tried to find the price and I was like, they don't list prices. I
found it. It. Now this is just this is basically the size of a milk crate, and it's just, a wooden, just think about going down to Michael's or something like that and buying a wooden crate that's record sized, and it is $275 for something that I could probably build for $9 or $10. Depending on what kind of...
but it's probably built of Bubinga or something like that.
Made from the same Pennsylvania hardwoods as our speakers.
Okay.
I don't think
maple?
That's yeah, it looks like maple. Yeah. Anyway, so the video, as I said before, is basically him saying, hey, he went to Japan at the behest of Audio-Technica. He does this video is sort of a backdoor commercial for Audio-Technica's cartridges, in large part. But he went to Japan and he visited a Japanese Kissa, and he talks about the history of Kissa, and sort of how they developed in the post-war era, as a way of, people to listen to music who couldn't afford the expensive setup to play 78s, and, how they're bars today. But in many cases, they were just like tea rooms back in the day. He talks about the communal aspect. He talks about the community aspect. He talks about, but in large part, what this is Japanese culture good, American culture bad. That is pretty much the point of this whole video. It gets dangerously close to Orientalism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But by and large, oh boy, I don't even know how to break this down, man. I don't know how to give my top level impressions of this. So I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to, I'm going to riff from there. What do you think when you pull this up?
I think that the mood of this video can be summed up in two sentences, one from the video and one from the comment section. From the video, Jonathan is his name, is that right?
Yeah, Jonathan Weiss, I believe.
Yeah, one of his sentences was, "Vinyl has become a shibboleth." That's a great word. You should look it up.
Yes.
And then, I love this. From the comment section, MFR58 says, "I share your ire at the cultural paucity in the West in the manner you describe," which is that is like the most Ignatius J. Riley comment I've ever heard. And Ignatius J. Riley being the main character in A Confederacy of Dunces, which is a great book, Dennis. You should read it.
I did read it. Yeah.
I'm mirroring the condescending attitude of the person in the video.
I got you. But and here's the thing. It's not just condescension. It's condescension with a heaping helping of Dunning-Kruger syndrome. I mean, it is the guy. Yeah. So the guy goes on this long rant about digital, and it reminds me of when Trump talks about the nuclear, and it's like, the nuclear what? Nuclear is an adjective, dude. Like, what are you talking about? This guy talking about digital is textbook somebody who doesn't understand digital. He goes on this thing to talking about, at some point he's like, oh, these headphones, he's like, one day the headphone won't even be connected to your phone, it'll just be connected to the cloud and only controllable by an AI chip. And it's like, what does that word salad even mean? What are you talking about? He's just, digital is bad, digital is bugbear, so I'm going to say a lot of digital vocabulary words to rile up my base, because I know they all think digital is the devil too. But if you know anything about what he's talking about with regard to digital, it just makes no sense. Like, how are you going to connect a headphone directly to the cloud with an AI chip? What does it even mean, man?
He has no idea.
No, but it certainly gets his people riled up,
Yeah, well, it's he talks a lot about how, the people in Japan, I guess in the U.S., they open these listening bars and people just sit around and drink, and I don't know, it's a bunch of bikers who get in fights or something. I don't know. Maybe they pull out guns. But, instead of listening to Steely Dan Asia, they're fighting over whatever, whether or not Steely Dan should be considered yacht rock. But because bikers fight over that all the time, I've noticed. And he talks about, and he shows pictures of how, people in Japan are supposedly paying attention to the music. Although he shows pictures of like two guys sitting there with cups of tea, reading books while they're listening to the music, and how, within the U.S. it's all drinking culture and blah, 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 blah. And you can't listen to music while you're drinking and all this kind of stuff. Although one of the commenters down there says, basically, he did this and talks about how people consume a beer or two while listening to Charles Mingus, Shirley Bassey, and whoever else the owner played. So I don't think his description is accurate there. I have never, I've been to Japan three times, and I have not noticed a reluctance to drink among the populace any more than here. And in fact, alcohol consumption is going down here. And I have been to innumerable music bars, not ones where they play records, some, but I go to, right here in Everett, we have Tony V's Garage, which has a slate of rock bands but it's not just, it's not all, Black Sabbath. It's, a wide range of bands, and it might be like a pop duo with some backing. It could be all sorts of stuff, right? And I have found that people, even though they are drinking beer, which I do when I go there, they're listening intently. They are not talking amongst each other much. Well, it's hard to talk amongst each other at Tony V's. It's pretty loud. But, and when I go to lots of music clubs, and people by and large are listening, and sometimes they're not, but there are clubs where it's more of a serious listening thing, and clubs where the music is just background, and you can have both. That's perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing. I mean, I'm really a former jazz musician. I mean, I still record and stuff, but I used to do a lot of gigs in LA with my trio, Tonic Trio. And, we were pretty decent. And we would go play restaurants. We would go play, corporate functions, things like that. And I'd say at just about every one of them, there was one person who was actually listening to us. And for the rest, we were background music. And we were just like, hey, that's fine.
No, I saw you guys play at a cafe one time. And I would say most
that place
people.
That was more serious listening, that place.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But like corporate parties, your background music, and that's fine. You're getting paid and you're having a good time. And usually, like I said, one person, two people come up to you and go, oh man, you guys are great. And they might actually sit closer to you so they can listen to you. And that's fine. And we never, ever, ever, ever cared. Now, granted, if you're John McLaughlin and you've got like the resurrection of Shakti or whatever, and you're on a stage at a concert hall and people start chatting about whatever, maybe that's a bit of a faux pas, but that doesn't really happen too much either.
Well, I tell you what, I've gotten annoyed the last, I think I've said this before, the artist that I've seen in concert most in my life is Lyle Lovett. I think I've seen Lyle 23 times now.
Wow.
Oh, God, he puts an amazing show. But the last 3 or 4 times that we've seen him, it's been really annoying because it's just been a social get-together. It's, people having conversations. And I'm just like, dude, Lyle Lovett is on stage. Would you please shut the F up and listen? But I do admit, I get annoyed when people go to a concert venue for which they paid like good money for the tickets and they're in assigned seats and they're still chatting. That annoys me, But like to go to a bar, I mean, I don't know. By and large, I think this guy, I wrote an article a few months back called Is Hi-Fi a Kink or a Fetish for You? And I think for this guy, it's a fetish. I mean, it has to be exactly this way or he can't get off, right? And it's like he can only enjoy music in one very prescribed manner. And if you don't also enjoy music in that very same prescribed manner, then you are doing it wrong and you're part of the problem. And
that's exactly what this Jonathan guy is saying, really.
Well, that's the point I'm making.
And that's just what I don't, I mean, I don't agree with that at all, because first of all, who the hell is this guy to tell me how I should listen to music? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, that's what one thing I really dislike about the audio industry is that there's a lot of people who are, I shouldn't say there's a lot, there's a vocal minority of people who want to tell us how we should listen to music. And what do they know about music? What do they know? Let's come play a gig with me. Let's see what you know about music. Yeah. And, or you know what? Explain what modal improvisation is. most of them will flunk that, even some jazz critics. And it's like, I don't need this guy telling me how to listen to music. Music has had a giant impact on my life. Here I am at age 63, and, I'm a professional audio reviewer and have been almost my whole adult life. I've played music my whole life, still do. I don't need these people, whether it's this guy or it's some high-end amp manufacturer or something, to tell me how to listen to music. I have it down, and it's good for a certain part of the audiophile audience, because there are people that are audiophiles because they want to feel superior, right?
Yeah.
In the same way, there's people that are really into high-end, I don't know, cooking knives because they want to feel superior, right? High-end kind of anything. And look, it's not like I don't. This guy's got a right to listen to music however he wants to, and he's got a right to present his own point of view. But I think he's a little full of himself, because he starts talking about how, the big problem is, in America is, we don't listen to anybody. And, that's the problem with our politics and all this stuff. It's like, well, great, dude. Thank you so much. You should have a column in the New York Times so you can mouth off about all your wisdom up there with, Brett Stevens.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It's just all so contradictory. So he goes on this long, supposedly anti-capitalist rant. He complains about how capitalism is the source of all of our problems and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking about how, vinyl is not part of that. It's at one point he says the resurgence of vinyl has no corporate or economic force pushing it. He's claiming it was just organic, the people rising up and demanding their records. But at the same time, I want to be like, dude, that $275 record crate that you're building, the worker who's building it, how much of that $275 are you giving them? Like, are they, I figured, somebody, I could crank out maybe, now my woodworking skills are not great. I could crank out maybe 5 or 6 of these in an hour.
Wow.
Let's do a little math here. They're pretty simple. So let's just say I could make 4 an hour. That's $1,100. How much you think he's paying the dude who puts them together an hour? I guarantee you it's not 5% of that, right? So don't talk to me about capitalism, okay? Yeah. Anyway,
who would you rather?
Don't complain that vinyl is there's no corporate or economic force pushing the resurgence of vinyl. Give me a break. What is Record Store Day, jackass? Anyway.
Okay, so if you are someday captured by an enemy force and they decide to torture you by feeding you YouTube videos, what would be more tortuous, watching this guy or watching Michael Fremer?
Oh, boy. I would say watching this guy, because at least Fremer's kind of consistent, At least there is sort of an internal logic in Fremer's rants.
Although I am inclined to go watch more videos of this guy, because he's got OMA on the future of high-end audio that YouTube is trying to serve up to me. I'm going to watch that.
Yeah.
Why not? I'm curious to see what someone like this thinks the future of high-end audio is. And this is not a high-end audio manufacturer like, PS Audio we were just talking about, or like almost any of the brands we normally talk about. These speakers are like these giant wood horns that are, they do not resemble the acoustics of like a Klipsch horn or something, or a JBL horn or something like that, right? They're these big, long things that look like megaphones. Yeah. And they're made of multiple pieces of wood, kind of, not bent, but like just, segmented and glued together. So they're made of, 16 pieces of wood, kind of like more like a barrel than a normal sort of horn that you would see.
But what if you said to somebody who'd never seen a Klipsch speaker before, horn speakers, this is what would pop into their brain, right?
Maybe so, yeah. And they are humongous. These things, the top of the line ones at least, are, these horns look like they're 3 or 4 feet long or something. So I would, I would be immensely amused to measure one of these, because I can just look at that and go, that is all over the map. That is when you're a measurement guy, speaker measurement guy, this is like the kind of speaker you live for. Because, you can measure a JBL and it's probably going to be flat. And you can go measure a Polk, probably going to be flat. You can measure a PSB, probably going to be flat. But when you measure stuff that's way off, you're just like, oh, cool. And when you hear the tones, depends on your analyzer, but mine goes, bleep. Right? Yeah. It's a logarithmic sweep. And that's the main test tone that I used. And when you hear it doesn't go, whip, it goes, you're just like, oh man, this is great. This is going to be great.
Oh, wow. I'm amazed that you don't watch NASCAR.
I never have.
Yeah, but this is like your NASCAR, seeing audio train wrecks or car crashes or whatever.
Oh, okay.
That's your NASCAR, man.
Yeah. But yeah, this is I would love to measure these speakers. I bet it is hilarious, although they'd be really hard to measure because where would you get a turntable that would be big enough to fit this thing? You'd have to measure it, outside.
Yeah, like in a football stadium or something with
like on a football field would be great.
Yeah,
or a baseball field would be fine. You could do good measurements there, and pretty good measurements, not the greatest but decent. Anechoic chamber, you need a really big. I've only been in one chamber that was big enough to measure this thing.
Yeah, you need like an anechoic, aircraft storage garage or something.
Yeah, I've been in one of those. There's one in the NRC up in Ottawa, Canada, where they measure cars and stuff like that, and you can actually drive into it. Cool. And it's like half of a basketball arena.
Whoa.
It's really cool.
Nice.
That's the only one I've been like that. Normally they're, 20 feet by 20 feet, working space or something like that, if even that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think look, the concept of music listening to, vinyl, that's fine, or even cassette or reel-to-reel, whatever. If you want to have a bar where you do that, that is awesome and it's great. And I've been to a couple of places like that. And I think it's cool. And, I wish we had one here in Everett, Washington. I would go all the time.
I am a true believer when it comes to stereo music, hi-fi systems. Like I literally believe it makes people's lives better. And I think one of the biggest problems, I'm not saying this is a societal problem. I'm not saying this would have changed I'm not making grandiose statements the way this dude is, but I'm saying I do believe our lives would be better if more people just normalized having a stereo system at home, some way of listening to music out loud with other people. And so I celebrate these places, a bar that is focused on actually listening to a stereo, man, great. Like any way you want to make that work, make it work. But you don't have to do it on my terms or anybody's terms. I think any way you can normalize listening to music out loud in a room with other people is good, in my opinion. And it doesn't have to conform to my cultural presuppositions or anything. Yeah,
I really wish there was some place like this in where I live. Maybe I should start one.
You should.
I don't know. Maybe I should.
You're going to retire eventually, so.
Yeah, and I've already got the turntable for it.
Nice.
It is an Audio Technica Soundburger.
Oh, very nice.
And which there's my segue.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
Yes. I do have an Audio Technica Soundburger, which is something we are going to discuss shortly.
All right.
Are we done with this guy? But I encourage
guy.
people to watch this video. Why not?
Absolutely. It's fascinating. I mean, it's almost like imagine if David Lynch just ate way too much LSD and then made a movie. And imagine watching that and just your emotional reaction to that. It's kind of the emotional reaction I had to watching this video. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand what is going on, but I'm having a lot of emotions about it. So,
it's actually kind of like reading Confederacy of Dunces. Because this guy, I remember my favorite line from that book is, veneration of Mark Twain is at the heart of our current intellectual stalemate. And he says that to like his mother or something.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, buddy. Well, let's go take a break and come back and talk about vinyl versus tape versus cassette versus streaming and these shocking results that we're in for. Shocking.
This is Audio
Unleashed.
And we are here to talk about another YouTube video. 3 YouTube videos in a row. Wow, this YouTube thing's really taken off, Dennis.
I know. That's a new record.
Maybe we should get
us,
on
though,
there.
Man. Yeah. Well, hey, we've got a couple of videos, so we need to make more, but
probably. But anyway, but this other dude did one that I thought was pretty good. It's well lit. I will say that. It's beautifully lit.
Yeah.
But it's also well conceived, I thought. And you turned me on to this. You found this, right?
I did, yeah.
It just came up in my recommendations. I just want to make sure it wasn't a listener. Yeah.
No, it just came up in my recommendations when I was scrolling through, looking at other stuff. So
this is by a guy named Dom Sigalis, and he is from a country that is not the United States. He's from London, it says, but he's got like kind of a French accent or something.
Is that what it is? I couldn't quite place it, but I'm not as cosmopolitan as you are.
His name is not French, but I don't know, man. But anyway, he's got a very cool jacket on that is patterned after a C90 cassette. And he's got quite a nice studio that is, like I said, beautifully lit. And he's got a lot of subscribers, so he's been at this for a while. I have not seen his videos before, but he wanted to compare. He's obviously a professional music producer and quite skilled, apparently, based on the music that he played. And he wanted to compare the sound of vinyl versus tape, meaning reel-to-reel, versus cassette versus streaming, which was Apple Music and Spotify, which use different codecs. And he made a production of a very dense sort of pop music production, something you could conceivably hear on top 40 radio, I think. And he dubbed it to vinyl. I don't know how he dubbed. I guess he had a record made, right?
Right. And, I guess probably they had just pressed it, for
they pressed release. It, and then he also dubbed it to reel to reel, and he shows the reel to reel deck. I can't remember which one it is, but and then also to cassette, and then I think so. And then he's got it from the streaming services. So this is a professional production that got dumped out there and put out there for the public to listen to. And and then he pulls them all into his digital audio workstation, which means, of course, that he digitizes the analog stuff. And then he runs them all at, I think he mastered them at like minus 14 dB LUFS, right?
I think so, yeah.
Which is fairly standard these days for a streaming service. I mean, Spotify's minus 13, I think. Apple's minus 16. So, it's in the ballpark. Yeah. And then he puts them all on his digital audio workstation where he can look at the waveforms, and he can also compare. He can do really rapid comparisons that are level matched, at least in terms of the LUFS value, which is the average level, over a certain period of time, right?
Right.
So not peak, but average level over a certain period of time, right?
Right. Well, and LUFS also takes frequency into account, right? So, I mean, if you've got more bass or whatever, that can affect your LUFS in different ways. It's basically, it kind of takes a variation of the Fletcher-Munson curves into account when determining how many LUFS something is. So, yeah.
Yes, I've written extensively about this, and you can see that on Soundstage, whichever Soundstage site I used to write about or write for. But if you Google Brent Butterworth LUFS, you'll probably find it. It was a pretty decent article. I kind of got in on the ground floor of this because I found out about it before from my good friend John Kellogg, professional audio producer guy. And I kind of got in when it was still not such a big thing, but now it rules the whole industry. Anyway, so this is all level matched, to a reasonable degree. And, and he can pull it up in his digital audio workstation, and he can just go right from one track to the next. He can play the whole thing, and he can go switch between the different ones really fast. And now the downside of this is what he's hearing is the sound straight off the digital audio workstation, which is uncompressed. What you are hearing is the sound that goes through YouTube's audio compression, which is either Dolby AC3 or MPEG audio, which is basically AAC at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but also, can I add a proviso to that? That's very important that a lot of people don't think about. The people talk about, you're hearing this compressed on YouTube, but what they don't talk about is the codec that is used and the amount of compression in the audio is highly dependent on what video resolution you're watching at. So anything 720 p and below. So if you do 720p or 480p, and this video by default plays at 720p 60, right? So anything 720p and below, you're on the audio is much more compressed, right?
So is it like 128 kilobits per second or something?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say if you're at 720 or below, you're actually down to 96 kilobits a second, right?
Okay, so anyway,
whereas if you go 1080p and above, I think you're at like 256 variable maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. But what you are hearing, this is what kind of shocked me, is I listened to this and I could hear the differences, but he was hearing clearly bigger differences than I did. And, granted, he's younger than me, but probably the biggest part of that was the fact that I was hearing it over, I was hearing the pretty heavily compressed version of this as opposed to fresh out of the digital audio workstation through a USB interface like he was hearing. So the differences he heard were probably a lot more dramatic than what we heard. Is that what your take was too?
I would think so. But I don't think that would affect the frequency response differences, which were pretty fascinating. And I guess what shocked me is look, nobody's surprised that there are frequency response differences with vinyl. And I wish he had dug into why more, but he didn't. What surprised me was the frequency response differences between Spotify and Apple, It's like,
that was a little shocking to me. I don't understand why that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot speculate as to why, because, all of these codecs, AAC and Dolby AC3 and whatever, even Bluetooth.
Spotify uses OGG, I think.
Okay, yeah, Spotify uses OGG, that's right. They are all supposed to be flat. And in my experience, they are flat. I've done a lot of measurements using... there's a lot of headphones I've measured that only take Bluetooth input. And I've run them through Bluetooth, and it's a flat response. Or some of them have Bluetooth input and a regular line input. that still goes through the digital circuitry, right? That still goes through the DSP that's in the headphones. Right. And the Bluetooth and the line input will often match. Sometimes they're different because they go through different circuitry. And so it's not been, and I measure Bluetooth receivers and stuff for Wirecutter. And, some of them have a little bit of sag in the top end, which could be from the codec, but also could be just from the really cheap electronics that are in a lot of these things. But he saw a lot more sag and a lot more frequency response variations in those than I expected. And you would expect that certainly from cassette, which is, boy, you have to get a really good cassette deck for it to be anything close to flat. And vinyl is inherently not flat. Because of the way they have to master it, they have to manage the bass. They have to manage the high frequencies, because once you get to the inner part of the record, it does not support high frequency anymore. Bernie Grundman himself told me that. He says you can't get anything above 15K out of the inner grooves of a record.
Right.
Right. So vinyl is not neutral. Right. Tape is supposed to be neutral, and reel-to-reel tape is pretty neutral if it's done right. Cassette, you'd have to. I think I found one cassette deck ever since I've been, measuring these things that actually was pretty close to flat, but it's rare. And then, of course, it depends on the tape you use and all that kind of mess.
Well, and also with reel to reel, the speed at which you're running it can affect the bass response.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Now, and also the overall fidelity. But so, what was your overall impression of this?
My overall impression was that I thought it was just. What I really liked was the direct comparison. I liked the fact that there's a very common tactic when people have an agenda with regard to listening tests, in that they will tell you what you're going to hear. And if someone tells you what you're going to hear, that increases the likelihood that you're going to hear it. And I like the fact that he just said, here is A, here is B, here is C, here is D. And he just went through each of them to let the listener make their impressions before he started going, okay, now this one, the first one is my master. The second one is the reel to reel. I liked that. But again, I think my biggest takeaway, despite the fact that I very much like the way he did it, I wish he had said, hey, here is who mastered the vinyl or where it was mastered. Here is the phono preamp. Never did he use the words RIAA equalization, right? So just the point that you were making, the audio master is EQ'd before it is pressed to vinyl, right? And then your phono preamp has an inverse EQ curve that undoes that equalization, right? Sort of reverses it. Well, very rarely is that perfect, unless you're doing the EQ in the digital domain, which the integrated amp that I use, one of the reasons I bought it is it does RIAA equalization in the digital domain, so it is perfectly flat, right? But that assumes that the RIAA equalization was applied perfectly in the first place. So it's a whole very moving target, and he didn't explain that. And if he did, I thought the sort of increased bass and decreased treble of the vinyl would have made more sense. There would have been more context for it, and also, as you mentioned in your segue setup, I don't know that the Soundburger was really the best turntable to do this.
He used a really cheap portable turntable. That's like the thing. I have one. It measures about like a foot long or something like that, and it's only about 5 inches wide, maybe, if even that. And you sort of clamp the record in between. And so the record's kind of sitting out there flopping, right? And then you have a little cheap tone arm that goes on it with probably like an Audio-Technica 3600 cartridge, one of their cheap but competent cartridges. And, it does not have anything remotely approaching, a high-end, really accurate RIAA curve.
Right.
I haven't measured it, but one can assume. Right. Since I have measured quite a few phono preamps, and there's significant differences. So this is like the almost like the Soundburger works fine, right? It's not the worst turntable I've ever heard, But anything that gets reviewed in stereophile is going to be better, like a lot better.
Right.
So although I got to say the vinyl didn't, I could tell the vinyl and the reel-to-reel and the cassette pretty easily because they all had high-frequency roll-off. Like a lot. They all sounded kind of dull to me. And although he's sitting here enthusing about them. So again, he's hearing something different than what we're hearing.
Here's something that surprised me, and I wanted to get your take on it. Like, he shows the waveforms of everything, and you can see his original master. Like, you can see the I wouldn't go so far as to call it brick-walled, but it is
it's getting there.
It's getting there. It is pretty limited. He's got an aggressive limiter on this master file. But then you look at like the reel-to-reel and the vinyl, and the peaks actually grew, right? It is almost like he ran it through an expander. And I was not necessarily expecting to see that. And I wonder if it is simply a consequence of the fact that those analog formats can't quite do the flat tops on the waveforms the way, a digital could or something like that. Like, where do those peaks come from? If they're not,
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And I was like, how does that happen? Because you would expect the opposite, right? You would expect a reduction in dynamic range going through analog, especially vinyl, which only has about 30 dB of dynamic range, best case.
Would it be tape? What's that thing called? The Gibbs phenomenon? Do you think it's something related to that? Where if you've got
I don't know. Does that have to do with the Bee Gees?
No. Maybe I'm getting the name wrong, but it's the thing where, like, if you've got a square wave in the digital domain, the waveform constantly overshoots, right?
Right.
So you get that, like, it goes, So you get that sort of weird hump at the corner of the square wave, and I wonder if there's something. Isn't that called the Gibbs phenomenon?
I've never heard that phrase, but overshoot is a common thing in audio.
Yeah,
and it is very possible if these things are introducing overshoot, and
it is called the Gibbs phenomenon. Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense. And overshoot is when you, instead of going up to the, when your sound level is rising as the wave, the sine wave or the square wave or whatever rises, overshoot is when it goes over, you're trying to get to, say, a maximum, 1 volt, right? And if you overshoot, then it goes higher than 1 volt. It goes up to, let's say, 1.2 volts, and then it swings back down to maybe 0.8 volts. And then eventually over a few cycles, it settles. I mean, you can see this. And I think probably if you go to Atkinson's stuff that he does on Stereophile, his measurements, or I assume probably you can see this on Audio Science Review as well. It's a comment. And maybe that's it. I was looking at that, trying to figure that out. Like, why would that have more apparent, at least in terms, I don't know that it was audibly more dynamic range, but it was certainly visually more dynamic range.
Yeah.
I was really surprised at that. And, that could be why, sometimes analog really does sound better. I mean, he's talking about how he loves the sound of reel-to-reel tape, and I do too. And it really, I had a really cheap digital audio tape deck, one of the very first ones. It was like a Denon or something that Ron Goldberg gave me. And it really didn't sound very good. And I had a Sony, like the top of the line Sony cassette deck that, probably one of the best ones they ever made back in the mid 90s. And it sounded way better than the DAT. And, for the same reasons that he's talking about, there's just a subjectively appealing sound to audio tape. And maybe that's just because some of us are, grew up on audio tape and we got used to that sound. And, all those records from, Miles Davis and Led Zeppelin and Joni Mitchell and whoever were recorded on analog tape. And that is the sound we're used to. I go to Innovative Audio up in Surrey, British Columbia all the time. I was just there 2 days ago. And, Gordon Soak, who we've talked about several times on the show, the proprietor, founder. I went up there to test cassette decks last year, and he's got a whole bunch of used vinyl there, maybe some new, I don't know. And he's got a whole bunch of used CDs, and there's always people in the store checking out that, right? Yeah. And then I said to him, I only had I had bought 2 pre-recorded cassettes off of Amazon, like Ed Sheeran and Ariana Grande, I think. And I said, hey, Gord, do you have any like old cassettes? And he sort of walks me over to this one part of the store, which was not even like a part of it that was on display. It was like a workbench, right? Yeah. And he points to like a rack of them. He just said, just take anything you want.
Nice.
And, I did. And a lot of them didn't play. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Used cassettes are not, that's a dicey proposition. Used vinyl works fine, by and large.
Yeah.
Used reel-to-reel can work pretty well, but used cassettes, probably not a good investment.
Yeah.
So anything else we have to say about this guy?
I don't think so, man. I think people should the main thing is I wanted to point people toward it and go listen to the comparisons yourself, because we can, pick nits about this dude's methodology, but I just think getting to actually hear the comparisons yourself in real time, wear headphones. I think it works better with headphones. And also, in case people don't know, set the resolution to at least 1080p so you can hear this with as little, compression as possible.
I have to say, I don't want to criticize his methodology much, because by and large, it's pretty sound and it's a meaningful, the thing is, once you understand the limits of what he does, which we've talked about here, this is a meaningful comparison.
Yeah.
So, and which is pretty rare on YouTube.
That's a good point. It's a good point. A lot of times it's people like pointing their, iPhone, microphone at a pair of speakers going, here's what this speaker sounds like.
Oh, God.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. You want to do some credits, bud?
I do. I want to say that this is a... who's this produced by, since I always screw it up?
It's a Butterburger production.
Oh, okay. That's half me, half you. No, half me and all you. Why is all of your name in, but only half of my name is? This is unfair.
Hey, blame Carnell, man. He's the one that came up with it. So,
there will be a new tune by me. I have the bass line written and the melody. I just got to figure out what kind of wacky stuff to put between them.
Oh, cool.
So I'll have that to you in a day or two. And
cool. Well, you spoiled it, man. I'm doing the editing and mixing and mastering this time. So
yeah,
if anything doesn't sound right, blame me.
And thanks to who turned us on to the Oswald Mills guy?
Lek Manin 9990.
Yeah.
So
extra special thanks to Lek.
Yeah.
So,
or Lek, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know who you are. Thank you, sir. Or madam.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So, all right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us, as always. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks, except for patrons. Stick around, because we got one more coming for you.
Our CES wrap-up.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is, if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
or audio
unleashed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.